Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story was a game-changer for fans of the Bridgerton universe. The limited series is a prequel to the groundbreaking Netflix hit, Bridgerton. It broke Netflix viewing records when it was released in 2023 and focuses on both the younger version of Queen Charlotte, India Rhea Amatefio, and the version that viewers see in Bridgerton. In it, Queen Charlotte's marriage to King George III and her search to find an heir are the focus. The first episode sets the stage for not only the other 5 episodes but also the royal families present in Bridgerton. The episode, entitled Queen-to-be, serves as the catalyst for the rest of the series. What happens at the end of the episode sets up the story that unfolds and eventually leads to the events of Bridgerton. The first episode of Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story, sets itself apart from its predecessor because it explores the dynamic relationships of characters that won't have been fully developed in the main series. As far as prequels go, the series does its job and adheres to the tone and aesthetics that made Bridgerton one of the most beloved series in Netflix history. Adolphus promises Charlotte will marry King George III. She isn't pleased with the arrangement. Queen Charlotte and King George. In 1761, Queen Charlotte isn't happy that her father, Adolphus, signs a contract for her to marry King George III. But, upon learning that Charlotte is a black person, King George III's mother, Augusta, Dowager Princess of Wales, invites prominent people of color to their upcoming wedding. The action is known as the Great Experiment as it was meant to desegregate society. The event is significant because it sets up the integration scene in Bridgerton. One of the things the Bridgerton series is most known for is including people of color who usually would have no place in a historical drama. People of color were excluded from positions of status in the 1700s and 1800s because of racist laws and ideologies. However, Shonda Rhimes' brilliant writing and world-building allow people of color to take on the roles of royals and leaders in the Bridgerton universe. So, since Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story is a prequel to Bridgerton, it makes sense the episode explains the origin of the integrated world found in the series. The first episode also sets up the Queen Charlotte that viewers have come to know in the Bridgerton series. She is rebellious but still concerned about honoring her family. While she is a far cry from the powerful woman audiences see in Bridgerton, some of her leadership qualities begin to bleed through as it is made clear from the beginning that Charlotte is not the type of person who wants other people making her decisions for her. Charlotte tries to run away from the marriage. But the Queen doesn't get far. Queen Charlotte and King George side by side. Before her wedding to King George III, Charlotte tries to run away. She doesn't want to marry him and thinks that running away will help her evade her responsibilities as ruler and not have to marry a man whom she knows nothing about. But, as she is fleeing, she runs into her future husband. Instead of King, he introduces himself as just George. The two proceed to have a beautiful night together. The pair decide to get married and enjoy themselves by dancing and laughing at the wedding reception. It's worth noting that Queen Charlotte and King George are also significant characters in the Bridgerton series, and the prequel does its job by setting up their characters, establishing their pasts, and showcasing their chemistry. When the pair is together at the wedding, it is beautiful, and they have a legitimate chemistry, which leads the audience to believe that they are actually great together. But, fans of Bridgerton know better. The first episode does well to set up their relationship and its eventual difficulties. The marriage ultimately goes through, but starts off rocky. More issues are on the way for the newlyweds. The first episode does well to set up Queen Charlotte and King George's relationship and its eventual issues. Just after the wedding, George reveals that he doesn't want to live with Charlotte at Buckingham House. Instead, he chooses to live at Kew Manor. When Charlotte confronts George about this, he snaps at her and leaves her alone on their wedding night. Charlotte is left to ponder the marriage in solitude. Of course, she is not thrilled with the way her marriage has begun and starts to question things. George blowing up at Charlotte and leaving her alone on their wedding night foreshadows the relationship issues that will plague both of their lives, especially Charlotte's. The limited series goes on to explore the royal couple's relationship problems and King George's mental illness. Historians and psychiatrists believe that King George III likely lived with bipolar disorder, via PBS. Years later, Charlotte searches for an heir, kicking off a succession crisis. The Queen's story begins. Queen Charlotte and King George III celebrate their wedding before a crowd. Nearly 50 years later, in 1817, the story jumps to the timeline presented in Bridgerton. Queen Charlotte learns that her only legitimate grandchild, Princess Charlotte of Wales, has died in childbirth. Princess Charlotte's death starts a succession crisis and acts as a catalyst for the rest of the limited series. After the princess's death, the overarching conflict in the story becomes clear. Queen Charlotte must find an heir to the throne, or her family's rule will end. It doesn't help that of her 12 children, all of her sons have only produced illegitimate children, and her daughters mostly remain unwed. At the end of the episode, Queen Charlotte finds herself pleading with all of her children to produce an heir to the throne. And, as they say, the story begins. The episode ends with the audience wanting to know how the Queen will keep her royal line afloat once she passes away. Now, viewers and characters alike are hooked and the story can move along with a clear goal in mind.